Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Danny Phantom. Okay, so this episode, Flirting with Disaster, well, essentially this is the episode where, they kind of give closure to the whole Valerie likes Danny thing, because that's what the episode ultimately winds up being, and, well, the episode is interesting. Because it does, and the episode is interesting because Technus is, ironically, the one who kind of helps them work through those feelings, and, we'll get to that. And also, this is unfortunately the last time we see Technus, because after this, he doesn't appear until the very end of the finale where he has like a minor role. So this is his last time as a major antagonist. Unfortunately, we do not see him after this. But, yeah, in any case, the episode opens up at the mall, where, of course, we find out that, we find out that Sam and Tucker don't like Valerie very much. Essentially what happens is Tucker is talking with Sam, and he is just going on and on about all of his various technology, with Sam just wishing she could kill herself. Essentially is what's happening. Tucker is just droning on. He won't shut up, and Sam really wish he would. But of course, it is at this point where Valerie sits down, and obviously they do not like each other, because it's established that obviously Valerie likes to hunt ghosts and other things, which obviously puts her very at odds with Danny and his group, who, are a superhero team centered around a half-ghost. So, of course, they don't like each other very much. But, in any case, it is at this point where, suddenly, as everybody is, just hanging around the mall, Danny suddenly bursts into the mall, fighting Technus. And, Technus gloats to claiming that Danny is never going to be able to beat him with his new upgrade. While Danny just takes the opportunity to mock him, pointing out that he decided to upgrade to a mullet, which, mullets are not particularly, well, I guess not, I don't know, I guess people don't like the mullet hairstyle. I think that's the joke, but, the two do briefly fight for a moment, and, Valerie immediately gets ready to go and fight and help Danny, potentially, but quickly remembers that her father has all of her weapons in his locker, so unfortunately, she does not have access to her suit. She unfortunately is without it, but eventually, Technus does wind up getting the upper hand on Danny, defeats him, and then leaves. And Valerie, of course, gets ready to corner Danny Phantom, but discovers Danny Phantom lying in the boxes instead. And of course, immediately switches on the charm, pointing out that she's very happy to see Danny there. And he admits that he's happy to see her back. And it's at this point where Technus is revealed to have that in order to escape, he turned himself into electrical code and hid inside Valerie's phone. And of course, listening to the conversation between her and Danny, he quickly realizes that the two like each other, and realizes that's something he can exploit. He quickly realizes he can do something with that. But in any case, it is at this point where he leaves. But it is a case at this point where they of course get ready to go on a field trip to Axion Labs, which courtesy of the school, and also Valerie's father, who has volunteered to give them a trip. And what we find out is that Vlad now owns Axion Labs. We find out that he essentially bought the building, and because we see his name on the building, and we also see that his face is now plastered front and center on the entrance hall to Axion Labs. He now owns it, most likely to cover up the fact that he stole a thing from there. But he bought the building. This is essentially what this is established to be. But of course, as they're giving the tour, Valerie's father does note that Mr. Gray does note that Danny seems a little bit nervous, and asks him if he's okay. And of course, he admits that he's just a little jumpy, although the real reason is that he now knows that his mortal enemy now owns Axion Labs. He's obviously very anxious about that, because he kind of realizes that he's going to have to deal with Vlad at some point, because Amity Park. He's buying a property in Amity Park. We'll kind of get to that a little bit later, but I'll explain my thoughts on that. But of course, Damon points out that he doesn't really have to nervous, pointing out that he seems like a good kid and that his daughter clearly likes him. But then also openly confesses that he better keep his, as he puts it, his weird ghost hunting crap away from. Well, not he doesn't say crap, but you get the point. He says to keep his weird ghost hunting stuff from his family away from his daughter. And with that, he just leaves. Meanwhile, Tucker's very excited. As we find out, first and foremost, he pretty much just takes over the tour at this point. He's very eager and excited. Because he's noting all the fun gadgets he can find at Axiom Labs. He has to point the X2 booster rocket. It's a jetpack that he exclaims can send somebody into space in a little under 2 minutes, which of course is very exciting and also kind of interesting. That it has the power to send somebody to space. Of course, we find out that we also find out that there's also a massive mega computer within Axiom Labs, and the way it works is that it has a massive security code on it, and as we find out, it's only a remote unit because the real unit is up in space. It is a massive space station, and the explanation behind that is that as Tucker puts it, it's so. He says this to Sam in particular, who is kind of confused as to what's so special about it, but he proceeds to explain how it is this massive space station up in space because it is so powerful that it could very easily fall into the wrong hands, and he obviously points out that it could be used to take over the world, and because it could take over, it's just so powerful that it can overpower pretty much any computer. So of course, naturally, Technus hears that, and from Valerie's phone. And realizing that he can use this to, potentially take over the world and become his most powerful yet, he then proceeds to put his plan in action. Essentially what he does is first and foremost, Valerie walks into a broom closet and is obviously very visibly confused as to what's going, and is obviously trying to look for her suit because she knows her father has it somewhere. And it's this point where Technus proceeds to leave her phone, uses his ghost powers to lock her inside the room. At which point he gets to work. He proceeds to overshadow the computer and climb inside of it, quickly points out that since it's locked by a very complex passcode, he points out it's child's play, but after realizing that it is in fact as complex as Tucker said it was, he realizes it is going to take a while and realizes he is going to have to figure out a way to stall for time. So what he does is, first and foremost, he uses Valerie's suit to frame her. It's heavily implied, and later I can confirm, but he hijacks into Valerie's suit and uses it to frame her by making her attack the building while he climbs inside, while he kind of fiddles with it. But of course realizes that that's not going to buy him enough time. That's really not going to buy him enough time, and of course everybody's visibly confused because obviously Valerie is just Danny notes it's weird. He notes that something is clearly off because she doesn't exclaiming that she wants to hunt ghosts or anything like that. She's not gonna kill the very obvious ghosts. But of course Danny of course fights the suit off briefly, but then is unsure of what happened. Meanwhile, we see Valerie walk out of the closet that she was locked in, and her father is livid. He's pretty sure it's her because obviously it's her suit, so he immediately brings her home, and after the field trip's over, and proceeds to get ready to scold her. But in case, Technus quickly realizes that he's going to need more time to actually hack into the system, and then realizes there's something he can actually exploit. That being Danny and Valerie's feelings for each other. So of course, Damon proceeds to bring his daughter back home to their apartment, where he's obviously pretty pissed about what happened. He's obviously very visibly angry about the fact that she destroyed his lab, even though she admits it wasn't her, and of course is very adamant about the fact that it wasn't her. But of course he points out that he just tells her that it better not happen again, and admits that, and tells her to go to her room. And of course she proceeds to go to her room, at which point she suddenly gets a message from Danny. which is weird. We're gonna get to that in a minute. And of course, she messages Danny back, or Danny. Meanwhile, it's at this point where Danny is on a video call with Sam and Tucker, and does point out his observations from the lab, that something was clearly weird because Valerie wasn't acting like herself. He notes that something was very clearly weird with her suit, and is wondering if that was actually Valerie inside the suit. And Sam, of course, points out it is, because nobody else would be wearing the suit. But of course, it's at this point where they all get interrupted because Valerie then proceeds to message Danny. And this is the first conversation that they're having. It is the first, and she texted him when we know that was the other way around. That's the hint that something is weird and screwy. And of course, Danny immediately hangs up on his friends to message Valerie with, of course, Danny, which of course, Sam and Tucker are not particularly enthused about. Mainly Sam. She's very visibly, she thinks that it's going to be a bad idea for Danny to, be in close contact with what is supposed to be an enemy. So, obviously, she doesn't like the idea of him messaging Valerie, but he ultimately ignores her. But, in any case, it's this point where they start messaging each other. And in the process, we find out some interesting things. That, we obviously know that Danny wants to be an astronaut, of course. We already knew that. We've known that since the first episode that he wants to be an astronaut. But we also find out that Valerie has a black belt. We find out that she is in fact very good at hand-to-hand combat, which of course I don't remember what kind of hand-to-hand combat. I just know hand-to-hand combat. That's it. But of course, at this point, we're obviously they're very visibly excited to get to know people. But and what's interesting about this is that it's clearly, it's obviously Technus manipulating them into being together. But obviously, what's interesting about this is that it's real information. It's actually, Technus is actually giving them real information, and I guess that makes sense. He's a ghost that controls technology. Obviously, he can hack into their personal accounts, find all their information. That makes sense. But, it is interesting that he's giving them real information instead of just feeding them false information. It is interesting that he actually gives them real stuff. But, in cases at this point where Sam, of course, this is where Danny starts gushing about Valerie. But, and this is also the funny thing where she name drops the name of the episode in the episode. First time they've done that. That's fun. But in case she asks Danny if he's done flirting with if he's been having fun flirting with Disaster. But Danny of course points out that she really should lighten up on Valerie, pointing out that she's fun. And he proceeds to expose all the things he learned about her from their little quote unquote chat. The episode leaves it vague. But it leaves it vague if Technus completely manipulated them the whole time, or if he only sent them that first message and convinced them to start talking with one another. It's unclear if he manipulated them the whole time or not, but it's interesting. But of course, meanwhile we find out that Valerie is bragging to some of her friends about Danny and how all the things she's learned about him. So overall, it's at this point where they're pretty excited. They're pretty excited to have actually gotten to know each other, and also start greeting each other like that. Like they start, obviously she comes out and asks him if he's Space Star. She calls him Space Star, I remember. But of course they just proceed to immediately hit it off. And Sam, of course, is visibly annoyed and tells them that she's really not in the mood for this, and so she leaves. And meanwhile, Tucker just notes that something is clearly screwy with his PDA because it's not acting right, and he's confused as to why. But he points out that he can probably figure it out later, and then he leaves. At which point, we then see a montage between Valerie and Danny going on various dates, and obviously it's a three-person date because obviously Technus is there the whole way, making sure that their love for each other continues to build. So yeah, of course it's very fun, but obviously, but of course throughout all of the dates. We see a lot of dates, and of course Sam points out that she's going to be keeping close eye on them, and is spying on them the entire time they're on their dates. And of course Sam becomes increasingly jealous about the fact that, Danny is dating another girl. Obviously, she's not happy about that. And because, we've already established they are going to be a couple by the end of the series. So obviously, Sam is visibly annoyed when Danny dates any other girl. Because, first and foremost, they're best friends, but that has blossomed into something more than friends. You get the idea. But, meanwhile, Technus is still trying to figure out what. Meanwhile, not Technus, but meanwhile, Tucker is trying to figure out what's going on, and notice he's still getting the interference, and eventually he figures out why. It's Technus. He eventually figures out that Technus is using his abilities to screen and maybe manipulate the dates. And Sam points out that he most seems to be playing matchmaker with some sort of ulterior motive, and of course, Tucker finds that hilarious, pointing out that there's a very funny, that is incredibly hilarious, that is incredibly funny that, Technus is playing matchmaker, but, of course, Sam admits that this is serious and that they need to call Danny, and, Tucker, of course, admits that, yes, they do need to call Danny, because he thinks that they would find it hilarious as well, but, and of course, it is at this point where, Obviously, Danny bursts into laughter when he finds out that Technus is helping him get a girl. That's his immediate reaction. Just, oh my god, it's just hilarious. It is. Because obviously, without the knowledge that Technus is hacking into a computer system, it's incredibly funny that Technus, in an effort to complete his world domination plans, helped Danny pick up chicks. It's funny, but in case Danny, of course, admits that it's very funny, and does point out that obviously he's very confused as to why Technus would ultimately be playing matchmaker. And of course, Sam points out that there's clearly something else going on that's obviously. So Danny she points out that maybe Tucker, that according to Tucker, he points out that it might be something at Axion Labs, since Tucker knows that's when his PA started acting up, but. And of course admits that maybe something is going on that would, cause the entire situation with Valerie. But Danny and Valerie overhears the conversation, by the way. But Danny points out that he doesn't fully understand why Technus would be pushing them together. He just knows that he's gonna continue seeing Valerie because obviously he thinks it's a little bit funny. But in any case, it's at this point where Valerie kind of overhears the conversation they're having and immediately pulls Sam and Tucker aside, asking them if they're okay. But obviously, Sam then proceeds to point out that she's been thinking about it a lot, and she obviously knows that Valerie and Danny are a thing now. So she gave it some thought and admits that if Danny and Valerie are gonna be a thing, that there's room in the group for one more. Which, of course, Valerie points out that must have been painful for Sam to say and pulls her into a hug for accepting her. While Sam just kind of winces from the social interaction because she doesn't like being hugged. But, because, she's an individual. Individuality is a thing for her. But, of course, Danny points out, once again, mocks Sam's observation a little bit, pointing out that he finds it funny that, obviously he thinks that Technus is playing matchmaker for some ulterior motive. He thinks that's funny, but it's at this point where Technus emerges in Valerie's suit. It is revealed that he was the one controlling it the entire time, and there's just big old numbers flashing across the visor of the suit. And Danny realizes now that Sam was in fact right, and then realizes that Valerie isn't in there. To which Technus responds through the suit that she never was. And of course, in this one where Danny starts being hunted by Valerie's suit, while Valerie sees Danny being hunted by her suit and is very visibly confused. She obviously has no idea why her suit is hunting Danny, but immediately realizes that she needs to spring into action and save him. Meanwhile, Danny is trying to find a good place to hide to go secret identity to transform into his ghost mode, but Technus points out that he can't because there's security cameras everywhere. Obviously, if Danny tries, his secret identity will be blown, and that's the end of that. So, of course, at this point, obviously Danny has to keep running away from Technus using his normal abilities. Obviously, Technus is shooting at him to Valerie's suit, and it's eventually at this point where Valerie steps in and proceeds to fight the suit herself. She proceeds to jump in and uses her black belt training to kind of fight back against the suit. Obviously, it's an uneven fight because she's a normal human with no superpowers, and Technus is using her suit against her, which has all of her gadgets and weapons and anti-ghost gear and all her other things that she normally uses to fight. So, of course, unfortunately, she has to find different ways to fight. Meanwhile, Danny goes to hide inside a dumpster so that he can actually transform into his ghost mode. And there's also a really funny gag where Valerie, in an effort to defeat her suit, tries to impale it with her keys, which only wind up getting embedded in the chest with her pointing out that not only is she gonna die, but she can't get into her house anymore. But in any case, it is at this point where Danny proceeds to tackle the suit in his ghost mode and proceeds to get ready to fight it. And Valerie, of course, decides to keep her distance and watch what's about to happen. And of course, she only picks up the latter half of the conversation. But Danny, realizing that Valerie isn't in the suit, means that he doesn't have to hold back. So he then proceeds to absolutely demolish it. He proceeds to completely destroy it with his ghost rays and all of his other abilities, and completely dismantling it and punching massive holes in it until it eventually shuts down and dies. And Valerie, of course, only sees the latter half of that, where she doesn't realize that Danny isn't holding back because Valerie's not in the suit. She just knows that Danny Phantom just wasted her suit, and that she could have just as easily been in it. And of course, he leaves without explaining what happened. But of course, Valerie points out that wasn't her, admitting I could have. But now she has proof. At which point, she proceeds to bring the footage from the school security cameras, to her dad, where she proceeds to show him that no, it was not her, and that she wasn't in the suit. And her dad, finally realizing that he was wrong and that she didn't destroy his lab in the first place, quickly decides to give her a hug and apologizes, pointing out that he's sorry for accusing her. But they just have a bit of a bonding. But meanwhile, Danny is meeting with Sam and Tucker in his house, and obviously Tucker and Sam point out that Danny did nothing wrong. They point out that obviously she wasn't in the suit. They point out that obviously Danny was not supposed to. Danny was just doing his job and defending Amity Park from a threat, which in this case happened to be Technus operating Valerie's suit. But Danny does point out that though he knows it's not really his fault, and he knows Valerie wasn't in there, she's probably not going to see it that way. He admits that Valerie, obviously she doesn't know that Danny knows her secret identity as a ghost hunter. So obviously he doesn't know that Valerie, Danny would know that she wasn't in the suit. She obviously would not know that. But of course he realizes that's just going to make her hate ghosts even more. And this of course is when it's at this point where Jack walks in, and he's since found out through the grapevine that Danny has a girlfriend. So he immediately sits down with her not with her, but she's not in the room. But in case at this point where Jack comes into the room, and he sends her through the grapevine that Danny has a girlfriend, so he immediately sits him down to very honestly have a very awkward father-son chat. So Sam and Tucker make themselves scarce. At which point he proceeds to explain. Of course, Danny is a little visibly confused, but explains that Jack just explains that he's just going to talk with his son for a bit, give him some important life advice, and then they'll leave some ice cream. So he then proceeds to pull out a tub of ice cream out of the freezer, and proceeds to sit down with his son and tells him that he understands that he thinks that he's going to be serious about this girl, and believes that one day when they do wind up being, when he does want to finally make it official, he then proceeds to pull out an engraved ring and tells the girl of his dreams it's for her. And of course, we find out that's a bit of foreshadowing, because Jack in this moment reveals that he's not as clueless as he looks, reveals that he engraved it with Sam's name. With, of course, Danny pointing out that Sam's not his girlfriend, with Jack only pointing out a right, and pointing out that he's truly is clueless, which, of course, Danny doesn't fully understand what's going on, but, he thanks his father for the ring anyway and puts it in his pocket. And of course, at which point his father then proceeds to take him to some of the ice cream, and they have ice cream together. Meanwhile, Danny proceeds to go and stake out Axion Labs, pointing out that whatever's going on clearly has something to do with Axion Labs, and clearly has something to do with Technus inside Axion Labs somewhere. So, and of course, Sam reasons that it most likely is the supercomputer Tucker mentioned, pointing out that it is capable of taking over the world and taking over every computer in the world. With Tucker pointing out that the only reason she knows that is because he told her that. But of course, Danny points out that regardless of what's going on, he realizes that eventually they're going to have to get to the main unit in space and shut him down. So he realizes he's going to have to sneak into the base. So, and of course, they use the Fenton phones to keep in contact. But it's at this point where Danny, ironically, gives Sam the ring to hold on to while he goes into the lab. And of course, she's very visibly confused because, as it turns out, she has the ring upside down, and she's just trying to figure out who the hell Wes is. So yeah. But in any case, Danny proceeds to fly through Axion Labs, and in the process of trying to figure out where Technus is, he winds up hearing a conversation between Valerie and her dad, where they are also similarly having an awkward father-daughter chat, like what Danny had with his dad. And what we find out is that she points out that she believes that she could very well give up ghost hunting because of Danny, because she does like him that much. She points out that she's very happy about that. She's very happy with him, and that he could very well provide a stable future for her. But of course, Danny is happy to hear that, overjoyed in fact. So he proceeds to leave. He proceeds to continue to leave, and tells Sam and Tucker what he just overheard about how Valerie would very obviously give up her ghost hunting for him. He's floored. But in case it is at this point where Danny eventually finds the main atrium where all of Damon's gadgets are, and he quickly realizes that Technus is most likely in the supercomputer, but also realizes that Technus is very close to escaping into the orbit and getting free. So he immediately grabs the rocket, and of course he knows that Technus is in the computer. Technus realizes that he's surprised that the ghost child found him. So and proceeds to mock Danny, pointing out that he's too late and that he's almost ready to go into space. But and of course Danny responds by grabbing the X2 rocket pack. But it's at this point where Damon and Valerie walk in after Danny accidentally sets off the alarm, and obviously Damon yells at Danny, telling him to put the jetpack down, while Valerie then proceeds to vent her frustration with her father, pointing out that this is exactly why she hunts ghosts in the first place, because they believe that they can do whatever they want and take whatever they want, and points out that somebody needs to put them in their place to keep them from doing that. Meanwhile, Technus realizes that he needs more time, so in an effort to keep Danny off his tail, he uses some of his ghost powers to upgrade Valerie's suit into a new suit design, which is cool. It's very cool looking, very sleek looking. But of course, Valerie is now wearing a new suit with an upgraded design. And using the new suit, she then proceeds to get ready to fight Danny. But by this point, Technus has since hacked into the supercomputer, and is now able to go into the large floating space station in space. And with that, he then proceeds to overshadow the space station in space, using it to become pretty much all powerful. He uses it to take over the world essentially. By just hacking into various computers around the world and duplicating himself inside all of those computers. He winds up taking over everywhere. He takes over Tokyo, he takes over Hong Kong, he takes over a couple of other different countries I don't remember. But he also takes over New York, all the places with all of the technology in them. But of course, Danny, realizing he needs to get to Technus and stop him, uses his rocket pack to get into orbit, and while also taking a space helmet as well, so he can breathe. Finally overjoyed that he can finally live his lifelong dream of becoming an astronaut. He's over the moon. He's just so excited to be an astronaut finally. But in any case, it is at this point where he flies into space. But before he can deal with Technus, Valerie winds up catching up to him with her newly upgraded suit. At which point Sam proceeds to tell him that he has company. And when Danny asks him what kind of company, she responds that it's his girlfriend. So of course Danny now has to evade his girlfriend, and eventually, she proceeds to trap him, and we see some of the new gadgets she has, which makes her a lot more powerful. And a lot more dangerous for Danny to deal with, because she can pull new gadgets seemingly out of nowhere. Because, they're made of ghost technology now. They can be used, she can essentially just materialize weapons out of nowhere. Very futuristic type stuff. But of course, Danny is initially overpowered by Valerie, and by accident, as he's about to be on his last legs, by accident, to push her away from him, he accidentally uses his ghost rays on her, which knocks her out. And of course, Danny of course didn't realize he didn't mean to do that, and is obviously very visibly shocked as to what he did, but realizes he doesn't really have time to deal with that now because he needs to go battle with Technus. And of course, Technus has taken over the space station, and Danny quickly discovers that none of his ghost powers work against Technus. He's quickly discovering that. So, realizing he has no other choice, he then proceeds to use the X-2 rocket to launches the jetpack into Technus' mouth while he's maniacally laughing, which causes him to blow up. And that's the last we see of Technus until the finale. Unfortunately, he blows up. We don't actually see what happened to him after that. But this, of course, causes all the computers he used the satellite to in spirit to kind of explode and blow up, and he just disappears from every single computer in the world. But of course, Danny, now happy that he's dealt with Technus, then proceeds to hitch a ride home back with Valerie using his intangibility so she doesn't see him. And Valerie eventually wakes up, realizes that Danny is nowhere to be found, and goes home, unaware that he's clinging to her board. But it's at this point where Sam is prepared to give her the ring, with Sam pointing out that it's extremely old-fashioned and that she's a little worried that he'll do it. But of course, Danny points out that he is very excited to, admitting that he obviously thinks that he's going to that obviously this entire thing is that obviously she admitted that she would give up ghost hunting for him, and admits that he has to at least see if there's something there. So with that, it's at this point where he meets with Valerie, but and tells him that he has something to tell her, but she speaks first and reveals that she actually does not want a relationship with him. She admits that her life is too crazy and busy right now, and of course she admits that she doesn't have time for a boyfriend. So she admits that she tells him for the time being that they could just consider being friends. And Danny is a little bit heartbroken, especially since she also adds to that it's not like he was going to give her some sort of lame class ring. But of course Danny laughs it off, but he's obviously very visibly heartbroken that he and Valerie are no longer a thing. And of course Valerie proceeds to leave, hanging around the corner and turning into her new suit. And she's visibly heartbroken as well. Neither of them wanted to break up, but they had to. But of course it is at this point where Danny proceeds to pass the ring to Sam, telling her to hold on to it, and she admits that he is indeed clueless. But in any case, that's how the episode ends, because the episode ends with Tucker once again striking out with some women who are more interested in Danny, who just got his heart broken. And unfortunately, that's how the episode ends. So yeah, unfortunately, the episode ends on kind of a sour note, where Danny, of course, gets his heart broken. He is obviously very visibly upset about that. And unfortunately, that's a very realistic thing, that sometimes relationships don't work out. Unfortunately, that's just the lesson of the episode. Sometimes you meet someone really great, and the relationship just doesn't work out. But you have to kind of swallow that and part ways as friends. Fortunately, that's just how it works out. But and unfortunately, that's it. But also that is the last episode of Technus. But I do want to admit that in this episode originally, and this is something I do want to admit, initially, Technus was going to get another upgrade in this episode. He was originally going to upgrade into Technus 3.0, which does have a design for it. He looks more like a futuristic robot than he would his normal ghosty self, but which kind of makes sense considering, you know, Ghost Master of Technology, he should at least look like technology himself. I don't personally care for the design, but it is a cool idea. I do like the idea of Technus becoming a full-on robot by the end of the series, where, you know, obviously as the Ghostmaster's technology it makes sense, but I don't personally like the design because I feel like that doesn't really mesh with what Technus is supposed to be. He's a ghost that becomes a robot rather than being a robot himself. I feel like that's a bit of a misstep, but I do like that he was at least going to get another upgrade, and the reason he didn't is because it didn't work with the story and what they wanted to tell with this episode. So unfortunately he did not get an upgrade in this one, but you know, still cool, still a fun episode, but unfortunately ends on a bit of a sad note. That unfortunately, sometimes relationships just do not work out, and you gotta kind of work with that. But in any case, that is gonna do it with my review of Danny Phantom. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. Also, be sure to go check out my Discord, because we are going to be doing a horror watch-along thing at the end of the month, which is next week. So please go join the Discord if you have not already, because I'm excited to do that. I haven't finally had the movie picked out, I think. I think you guys will like the movie I picked out. But yeah, we're going to be doing that on the Discord. I hope you guys will enjoy that. And I have to message some people, see if they want to do it, but I will do that either today or tomorrow. I'll work on it, but in any case, yeah, thank you guys. So be sure to go do that. And also, finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the playlists linked in the end screen. The top playlist is Megas Month, which I did for my birthday last year to celebrate the 18th anniversary of Megas XLR, which is a great show gone way too soon, unfortunately. It only got 26 episodes. Could have gotten a lot more, but Cartoon Network screwed with it a little bit. So unfortunately, we're never going to see that show again. That was a once-in-a-lifetime series. We are never going to see that again. And also, the more on brand with what we're doing is Courage Month, which I did 2 years ago for Halloween. If you have not seen that one yet, please go check that one out, because that one was a lot of fun. I made a special bumper for that. I put a lot of work into the opening sequence for that. I hope you guys appreciate it. I didn't have time to do one this year, but yeah, please go check that out, because I had a lot of fun with that. But in case, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.